Welcome everyone to the ENCLAVE series. This is a series that was begun, as most of you may know, last year by Jean Uving and Ray Armentrout, and they were really gracious in letting us carry it on after they did 2 series of it, and now it's being managed by David Weiss, Tenny Nathanson, and myself here from Tucson, Arizona, and all the readings are also recorded and will be available on the Chax Press YouTube channel within a few days anyway. Okay, I'm going to be just slightly more long-winded than I sometimes am in this introduction, so bear with me, please. I'll just say at the beginning. Daphne Marlatt was born in Australia, and she is in Vancouver. She immigrated to Canada from Penang, Malaysia, as a child in 1951. She is a critically acclaimed poet and novelist whose cross-genre work has been translated into French and Dutch. The bicultural production of her Canadian Noh play, The Gull, received the 2008 International Uchimura Naoya Prize. Her long poem in prose fragments, The Given, won the 2009 Dorothy Livesay Award. In 2005, she was appointed to the Order of Canada, and in 2012 received the George Woodcock Lifetime Achievement Award. Her recent poetry titles include Liquidities, Vancouver Poems, Then and Now, and then just now, there's another Then and Now that is just out from Talonbooks. Also a selected called Rivering, the Poetry of Daphne Marlatt, and Reading Sveva was in 2016. Talonbooks in 2017 brought out Intertidal, collected earlier poems, 1968 to 2008, 40 years of earlier poems, which is really wonderful in a edition that's 600 plus pages. She has taught and served as writer in residence at various universities across Canada, as well as at the Banff Writing Studio and Sage Hill Writing. First, let me just say I am awed by Daphne Marlatt's work and the prospect of introducing her. She is, to me, a living treasure, I hope that doesn't hurt, with recent work as fresh as ever and early work as fresh as ever. And who in 1974 was writing documentary poetry about a small fishing village and its past history as a camp for Japanese Canadians. That is work that could be entirely contemporary in its documentary, ecological, and ethnic concerns. That was Steveston, the first work of hers to come to my attention, which made me find her early leafs and look forward to her first collection, What Matters, writing 1968 to 70. So I've been reading Marlatt, though not enough, for over 35 years. By the mid-70s, when I began reading her work, there were a lot of very strong women writers, yet if you were to take classes in poetry or look at work published by major publishing houses, and even many of the avant presses I admired most, you had to look a little harder for those women, or some would say a lot harder. But there they were, and one I looked for, recommended to me by such contemporaries as B.P. Nicol and Robert Creeley, was Marlatt, unique among them for a kind of absolute strength of vision, a piercing and deconstructive concision, and a lyrical beauty. When one reads, and I'm going to try sharing for a moment some of the things I'm excerpting a bit here if I can, so give me just a second. So when one reads Moondrops early, roused rocks, dry already a firefly, threats rain it, flickers, green light over, night sinks rust. One feels the drop of moonlight, the flickering of rain, the possible but not stated slow drip of water in the drain, some view of the world, of time, of light, of thingness that combines the best of William Carlos Williams with the condensaries work of Laureen Niedecker, whose work itself was only coming to be known in the early 1970s. Marlatt Steveston collaborates with the photographer Robert Menden to reveal a place both hurt by time, yet standing as an individual place, its realness. And oops, I want this to go up. Okay. Multiplicity simply there. The physical matter of the place, what matters, meaning don't get theoretical now, the cannery. Here are the bodies of a generation truly working and living in and with place in a work that is eco-poetic 25 or more years before that term came into vogue. A work of place where clans of the possible are gathering, the Chinook, the Coho, rivering just offshore are us. Us. The us in Marlatt is a writing of the body, individually and collectively. She has written of being impressed with the work of Charles Olson, but his large and expansive body was his own, and she decided to write in a way that took on the physiological processes of women's bodies, writing about early on giving birth, nursing, physical sensations of constant change found in the shifting drift of a sentence. Maybe it is such a methodology, an archaeology of being, that lends her intense lyricism a sense not of being a flight into fancy, not aligned so much to the romantic sense of lyric, but to a very earthy and specifically grounded life and practice. Red blossomed on my slip on the floor of the ferry's much-traveled carpet under my spine, feet of oblivion walking by on deck. That was the fruit of beer drinking, she'd have said. And now I'm only at about 1990, barely touching on the early work. I would love to read all of 1994's Impossible Portraiture to you, which I consider one of, if not the greatest love poems of the last 17 years or so. But at 8 pages, I can't quite do that. Still, here's just a passage with the eyes herein being entirely lowercase, part of the play, not above it. Behind your face, not literal, love shimmers its biosphere, some instant play I recognize in cheek, lash, light, holds us with it. Characteristic, I see you deep in the unexpected arms outstretched to wave pure alabaster light or quartz there in your eye, hair rising off your chair and into polar dazzle constellated in the wear of you. Small bear, a play on a flow just off the porch beyond Vesuvius and through the corner of your eyes, ferocious light. I've been talking or perhaps raving about work very well represented in Marlatt's magnificent 600-page plus Intertidal, which gathers that work from 68 to 08. Late in this book, she absolutely pares down or perhaps brings out the essence of what she has been doing all along in connecting us to the world and to each other in Mes Semblables. I don't, you could see that as a rewriting of, or an answer to Baudelaire, but in Mes Semblables, this meshing of things, the breathing out of furs, infinite complex circle, our blood intermeshed, light in synthesis. The gift, you said, aware en masse this mess of human undoing. Intricate interweft, divers blue-black wings shake your water, glitter eyes. In the last work included in that massive volume, Short Circuits, she still writes of this process of the body, but also mind, this enduring habit and need to take that definitive I and strip us back to gender underlay, or what's in store, say. And what is in store may be a matter for discovery, for happenstance, a relativity we inhabit, for a reason, or perhaps the word on which this book ends, just because. It's not always easy to find out about Canadian books in the United States, and that is an absolute shame. Literature should have no borders. Certainly, Marlatt is an international writer of the highest order. Her Intertidal is a gathered testimony to that. Please go find it. And now the next volume is out too, or the next book of hers, Then Now. Though I could spend years with this one, I think the next half hour or so will be an absolute pleasure. Please welcome Daphne Marlatt.
Wow, thank you, Charles. I'm overwhelmed by that. That was an extraordinary introduction. Thank you. I also want to thank you and Tenny for inviting me to read in this second iteration of the ENCLAVE reading series. And I want to thank David for technical help to get me here, despite the vagaries of an old laptop. And I'd like to acknowledge that this, although this reading is reaching you through Zoom, I'm actually reading, sitting here on the territory of the Coast Salish Indigenous peoples, particularly the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, who rightfully still own this land. So my gratitude for being allowed to continue living here, writing here, relating here. So thank you all too for listening. In this long pandemic time, I have missed the energetic presence of a live audience. I have to say that. It feels so much less distanced. But on the other hand, I'm grateful that online readings can bring all of us here from our actual distances. As Charles noted, and as I said earlier, I'll be reading mostly from my new book, Then Now, but I'll preface it with a couple of poems from two earlier collecteds. When one reaches the age of having collected works, I suppose it's inevitable to look back over the decades of writing and see what seems to have driven this work. For me, I think now it's an interest in estrangement, particularly in the immigrant experience, its double nature, wanting to become accepted, to step through the door of difference into all that's here, and at the same time closing the door on there that shaped me, to stop missing it. Georgetown in Penang is deeply multicultural, although in the 1950s that was overlaid by British colonial culture, manners, government. The pleasure of working on Then Now has been not only in discovering the young man my father was before I knew him, but also, and this is the deeper pleasure, recovering those few Malay words I knew by the time we left, as well as learning new ones, often words that somehow felt familiar, so I probably heard them used around me then. In a deeper sense, this work has taught me the porousness of person, of who we think we are. I think of estrangement in seeing beyond colonialist ways of thinking that still continue to estrange those seen as others, whether racially, ethnically, or in terms of gender. From that recognition stems a general interest in relating, both in how we can more fully narrate being here now, and in all the ways we are variously interconnected in our communities, urban landscape, and larger biosphere. This includes the urgency of recognizing how we are not only connected with, but implicated in the current critical state of our planet, that largest sense of home. you'll hear both the prose of letters and the variable timing of poetry in this reading. It seems I've long been interested in both genres, having written both long and short poems as well as novels. There's a pull I experience between, on the one hand, an interest in history, and on the other, being present to the immediate moment. A pull between prose with its syntactic lean toward completion, itself a form of mini narrative, and poetry's radiating dimensionalities, its open spaces of pre-worded potential. So let me start with something from Intertidal, collected poems 68 to 2008, edited and insightfully introduced by Susan Holbrook. Here's something called Far from Long Harbor. I wrote this when I was living for a year and teaching in Saskatoon, and quite clearly missing beyond the coast, which is my home now. It begins with a bird that we don't see on the coast, the black-billed magpie. Far from Long Harbor, up the transverse path she flashes, sungleam on snow, diagonal light behind, cloud banks the real. Spaciousness, clarity, wing flutter. She busy gleaning, this ache in prevalent snow, a blue-black alternative, an other way of seeing, and why not a bird's? Lifting the ridge of island, rim up, lifting as in raising the blind on sudden day, sun a sheen long on long waters, this far-seeing perspective opens. Long harbors, weeping diamond arms, ice spent, unfold on either side the ferry noses in, oh, gentling her wake against the usual litter of logs, cormorant crested, seals lifting blurred heads, sleepy eye out, riding the upfall. Home is an ache. And this is not unusual, this ripple from one side expanding out and out into awake, release. When clouds break, ice cracks. What packs me into myself implodes with a soar of muscle over a gap, a distance air engulfs like water or enlaced rivers tangling across the parallel that miscolors their current, alien or ours. And now I want to read something from Rivering, an earlier collected. This came out, it was edited and very insightfully introduced by Susan Knutson. Came out in 2014 from Wilfrid Laurier University Press. And I want to read a lyric from a series entitled The Month of Hungry Ghosts, which was written in 1976 on my first visit back to Penang. And we stayed in the actual house that my family had lived in when I was a child. So it's about watching the Kaboon the gardener sweeping, this was a daily ritual, sweeping the grass outside, which is not like our grass here. It's a much thicker form of vegetation. Coming in, who used to live here, used to the sweep of Kaboon's broom, edge of a tide line morning used to run her energy along, alone, exulting in birdsong, liquid trills, squawks. The long, reversible arc of his arm, swept up grass, not up, around, a kind of sortilege, Kaboon at the bottom of the garden, not looking up at the underside of sky and the easy sweep of his arm, the long advance of noon, a tide poured through his broom. She ran through crests of song, wave on wave recede, while the broom continues its far-off rush, like surf coming in. She's gone. So now, let me get to then now. I'll hold it up so you can see the title and the cover, beautifully designed by Les Smith. This is a book edited by Katrina Strang. And my gratitude, my gratitude to both of them, both of Talonbooks. There are two sections in this book. The first section consists of excerpts from letters that my father wrote as a young man in the 1930s, almost 90 years ago now. In 1933, he first took ship from England to Georgetown on the island of Penang, which was then part of the British colony of the Straits Settlements, to work for a firm looking after the accounts of rubber estates and tin mines on the Malay mainland, as well as a couple of hotels on the island of Penang. Until the summer of 1941, when he went on leave some 6 months before the bombing and occupation of Penang by Japanese forces, he wrote extraordinarily detailed letters home to his mother every week. Excerpts from them are interwoven with passages of my short line poems written in response to those excerpts. The other side of his there then, my here now, with its continuing consequences of capitalist exploitation. So here's the Runnymede. The Runnymede was one of the hotels his company looked after, and it was where he first stayed until he could join what was called a bachelor's mess. The Runnymede. I have now been here 2 weeks and feel like an old stager. Your 1930s slang to Mum in Surrey, Depression-era cottage, localizing in late colonial luxe by the sea, this 3-year-old hotel, the site of Raffles' 1808 villa gone up in smoke. Everything is done on a lavish scale, and certainly space seems no object. My room is about half as big again as our front room and twice as high. Windows run along one side and they are always open. On another side are 2 doors opening out onto the veranda. Another door opens out onto the corridor. It would be a drafty affair in England as a corridor opens out both ends to the weather, having nothing but a balustrade at each end. This openness is one of the features of the place that appeal to me. November 7th, 1933. Lavish on rain, sweeps the open windows where Philippine Islanders play for dinners you must dress properly for. I have my own bathroom. It is rather a scream. Imagine being shown into a room about as big as our kitchen, a red stone floor, bare walls, absolutely bereft of furniture and fittings, except in one corner you can see a Shanghai jar with a shower bath and a little pail. The jar is 2 feet 6 inches high and a foot across at the top. It is full of cold water. A piece of soap made by Atkinson specifically for the hotel is provided, but there are no instructions. I could not make up my mind whether to attempt to stand in the jar or not. Decided against it in the end. The proper procedure apparently is to wash out of the jar and use the little pail as a dipper. The shower is provided to rinse off the soap. Having got used to it, I now quite like this method of bathing. The luggage that language carries onto the page. That's the ticket. Calling card, class. Export markers of empire washed up and forgotten. Not quite. The old E&O, still luxury heritage, thrives on its seafront site in town. Same colonial lavish, now ornamental cannon, this child once saddled. When rain is coming across the straits, you can see it, for it rains so hard that the sea is more or less flattened out and looks as if an invisible broom were sweeping out the waves. Clean sea house clearing, waves of nostalgie. 1940s Almas I recall in slip-slap slippers, slow and warm, unrolling chicks in the afternoons. You never spoke of your 30s in bachelor mess. You had the boy shake you awake from late night dance hours for machine gun practice. Faded boys of memory ride these handwritten waves. Such overlays. Hotel swept clean by bombs, the war you foresaw might approach that storm. Hotel turned military base before occupied and after changing government hands. Make way for the new. A different oceanic broom, clearing it all as sea levels rise. Now, a couple of years later, 1935, this is a letter about one of his, well, probably one of his early trips to the mainland, to a rubber estate. Constant arrivals. I have been doing the hectic businessman touch. Voila! Wednesday, February 6th, found wire from Kinching saying it was essential that I go to Samambu Estate, which is at Kuantan on the East Coast and in Pahang. Thursday, caught night mail from Penang. Arrived Friday at 5 a.m. to Kuala Kubu, car waiting there for my journey to Kuantan, right across Malaya, some 250 miles. Your hectic reports of surprise arrivals at new ways of being. For that ear you hear, always awaiting your elsewhere words, and other form of account. I have told you that Penang is unique in that it has a wonderful railway station, but no railway. On Thursday, I toddled round to book my fare. The place seemed closed down. So I wandered in to interview the station master, who was helpful enough to recommend a car hiring firm in Kuala Kubu who would take me to Kuantan, but he declined to sell me a railway ticket. Disconsolately, I wandered into the booking office and found a Malay lad having 40 winks behind the scenes. After consulting several schedules, he decided what the fare would be, but couldn't find a Kuala Kubu ticket. Was he upset? No, he had imagination. He got a blank ticket and wrote Kuala Kubu on it. Imagine that taking place at Victoria Station. At 8 p.m., I caught the launch, and in half an hour we arrived at Pirai on the mainland. A coolie grabbed my bags and promptly vanished. After searching for some time, I found a sign labeled Customs and discovered him waiting patiently inside for my arrival. I suppose it was foolish of me to think that he would have gone to the train. I might have known by now that in the East, the main object of any venture is treated as a mere incidental, following a host of very important preliminaries. London memory, beside the point, here, now, where strangely actual colonial disjuncture junks, sails you love, elsewhere expectation. The motor drive from Kuala Kubu to Kuantan was interesting, though tiring. The journey down to sea level disclosed in places a view of the road, over which we were to travel hundreds of feet below us. It is a remarkable piece of engineering. The last 90 miles of the trip was through thick jungle without a break or sign of human life. On occasions, tigers can be seen on the road, they say, and the majority of Sisis will not do the trip after dark. At times, the road gets flooded and washed out. The bridges collapse under the strain of the water. There are many rivers to cross by ferry and by bridge. Through the limestone spine of jungle canopy, Meranti Saraya's silver-crowned height, the Lantai's coppery one, both dipterocarp, their pale, drooping wings of tiny fruit above that lush, that insect-whirring undercover. Drive to account for. Straight lines of Brazilian, Pará, or Rotansamambu rubber. Booms came and went. Shanghai tile, London sterling. Profits 7 times production costs of low-paid Tamil tappers and pre-dawn mist slipping ghost-like between the lines to collect white latex strips. Rubber tree's life a mere 25 years. And theirs? Anglo managers came and went. Indentured tappers stayed, lighting prayer lamps. At the end of the road, I came to Kuantan, a small town and end to Samambu estate. In this wild and outlandish spot, I found a marvelous bungalow with tiled floors, a big staircase inset with marble, a Roman bath built on a tiled floor, electric light, bell pushes for the boy, modern sanitation, and a fountain in the front garden. Truly, this is a land of contrasts. February 15th, 1935. And the last one from the first section that I'll read is called Arms Alarms. He belonged to the 3rd Battalion of the Strait Settlements Volunteer Forces. This is 1936. We're not supposed to be particularly good riflemen now that we are so preoccupied with machine guns, but it is up to us to compete with the Asiatic boys who are not machine gunners. We got an extraordinary notice round this morning, giving us orders what to do on the proclamation of a precautionary warning, where to report, suggestions as to what to do with wives, children, jewelry, furniture, etc., and finishing up by pointing out that any delay occasioned by not taking these hints would, quote, not be tolerated in the event of a general mobilization, end quote. I don't know whether there is any particular object in all this, or whether the instructions are merely of a general nature. The position in China looks serious in the extreme. I hope it will have sorted itself out peacefully by the time you are reading this, but I fear there can be no lasting settlement. But I cannot imagine that it would affect us here with any suddenness. June 11th, 1936. Here a crowd of crows caw-caw incessant, insane warning at the bandit-eyed raccoon prowling a neighbor's roof. As if that were the only alarm to be raised these days of history intensified. Oil wars, drought, and famine fished out parts of ocean, coral die-off, Arctic thaw, Australia burning. Will strident crow gang cries outlast us? Only if trees do. So the second section of this book consists of long line poems, most of them looking like prose, on the page. and mostly, but not always, written out of my memories of my childhood in post-war Penang. Its opening poem is the only short line poem in this section. It's a fractured embrace that positions what follows. Where in Georgetown? I don't belong here. Body responds, opening up, out to in, all in embrace of air. Thick with stir fry, fruit rot, harbor sludge, incense stick, smoke, motorcycle exhaust prevalent now. Heat memory site, come home to root, trace. Here in the else, where, here also from, a fractured complex. So I'll read several from here if I have the time. This is called Nostos and Not. Nostos as in return home. What this body enters, thick heat, monsoon jetties, harbor, mud smell deep in, oh, I should mention, me as in noodles, M-E-E. I'll start again. Nostos and Not. What this body enters, thick heat, monsoon jetties, harbor, mud smell deep in, me and nazi fragrant, concept free. It's coconut oil and garlic rich and salted ikan bilis. Where no one pisses now in the not so open drains, exhaust, where city markets reno stalls the heart by stainless steel, new countersinks await less fish, no durian, no mangosteen, South African apple talk instead by stalls the garland boys thread saffron, mum head, swift rose petal discard. Still, the trishaw maker's skill, adept in shrine-lit interior, steady focus, fits a silvery state of art, new wheel to cart, it's his own place. And out of me, whose memory's sudden jolt knows Georgetown dispensary still, and mother, mem, slender in white cotton, fresh from up the hill, ordering worm pills or calamine, then off to Whiteaways, or maybe Pritchard's ice cream table, curlicues from tiered tray, this child in tow, allowed to choose vanilla slice, not kue mue, or ice kachang, not then. This porous body's deep Vancouver grown, yet here familial history steeps imperial sites, bank chambers, long arcade, no war amp beggars squatting in its shade by Tuan's office door, no sice, no king of heaven shrines to grace Edwardian pillars, now British culture's gone, and yet it's advertised, Georgetown heritage restored. Okay, here's a very personal poem. Starts with a quote from a book of nursery rhymes that I had there when I was a child. And they were British nursery rhymes, English nursery rhymes, but they had all been translated into Malay. So there was English on one page, Malay on the other. What else? Okay. Ma. Lalat, hi, Lalat. Ladybird, ladybird, your children are gone. Back then, when words we learned became agents of separation, orang putih, never orang gaje, you ruled the kitchen, wise-eyed and laughing, cleaver raised. Back then at nap time, I knew where to sneak out to find you with Enkim, makan on the round white wall of the goldfish pool, sarong hiked as you cooled your feet, Enkim in black pants refusing to break the rules that you, with throaty chuckle, dismissed. Ama of incense, Ama of stained fingers, of Churut and Thai shrine, its offering cups glimpsed down the corridor of forbidden territory, the servants' quarters. Ama of graying hair in a tight bun, of Tidapa, of consoling hugs, who would sneak up the back stairs with a plate of me for my sister, the naughty one, sent to bed supperless again. Ama plunging live crabs into a steaming kettle. Ama counting. Ama of knives. Lalat hai lalat, who taught me not to recoil from fish lips at my ankles in the pool. Kissy, missy, ikan kissy, soft nudges toward another way of seeing connection. Ama of sarong kabaya far from home. Ama known and unknown, what was your name? Where are your children, we chanted, as you, Mati, cleaver in hand, chased us out of the kitchen, our half-believing shrieks. Ama so moved to see us when we flew back years later, coming to your door, you fully gray now, stooped, the paper-thin skin of your hands in our grown ones, hardly believing we'd come. Mari, Mari. We were your children too. How am I doing for time, Charles? Okay.
10 or 15 minutes, I think, maybe.
Okay, well, I've got just a couple of more to read. I live and have lived for about 2 decades now in a small neighborhood in Vancouver that now adjoins what's left of Vancouver's original Chinatown. Jackfruits, overripe, darkening flood tide of scent, its flesh bumps split and oozing. Here at Kiefer and Gore, far so. Oh, I found my first misprint. Okay, let me start again. Jackfruits, overripe, darkening flood tide of scent, its flesh bumps split and oozing here at Kiefer and Gore, so far from Ponge de Sacrifice odorant orange, reinvoked with each act of peeling in a northern kitchen, his lanterne vénitienne de saveur, couleur et parfum. A profusion, yes, decorous, alongside jackfruit's bombast, his orange turned sudden light hold, Venetian blown glass, C.K. Williams translates as Chinese lantern. And there they go, a vermilion soar of paper orbs over Penang Street. But jackfruit, are jackfruits another story, shipped from Malabar, Chaka migrating east through trade for centuries to this northern Chinatown street? Weighed in the hand, Nanka's heft signals and other wares, soil as jackfruit lingers on fingers, gutting seed from fleshy pockets of memories, sun-dressed child, under sun's heavy hand is grown, hand lifts plastic wrap portion set on white mini trays of styrofoam. Okay, this is the last one I'll read. It's called Sourcing, and it includes a reference to Vancouver artist Lai Wan's photo mural, Fountain, the Source or Origin of Anything, that was displayed on a wall of the CBC building downtown in Vancouver from 2014 to 2015. It was based on a frame from a 1956 CBC short film, that moved from what was then a lively Chinatown to the fish boats and float houses moored under a nearby bridge. And that bridge, the other end of that bridge, was once, under it was once the territory of a village, Snouk village, an indigenous Coast Salish village. Sourcing. Oceans of clouds, wet, penetrant, or penitent, however we choose to see what's around, or whose walking suffused in pour underfoot or overhead, its wall-size Lywan's fountain, origin frame some summer afternoon on False Creek shot 5 years after we arrived from monsoon rains, knowing nothing of how West Coast clouds prehistory here. What source? Another West Coast skin welcomes rain there, its ambulant drumming overhead, in yellowy light, oiled paper above his familiar face, grinning in memory, revel. This is a payang. Raindrops slide down Kerta's top, its bamboo spokes radiate old ways, not his he learned on arrival, where sometime in the 40s he'd stay on. Could not. Given war, given nationalization, ascendant, economies changing hands. So 50s departure to safer harbor here, no origin point in times earlier, viaduct, boats below on settler grounds, False Creek, earlier sailors Snouk, seagoing canoes cross sandbar flats so quickly industrialized. Now water's essential quality eclipsed in dollar dregs, corporate claims obliterate demos skin, lost as too much coming down, floods out who and what was here. So I'll stop there.